Hello and welcome back, folks. So today we're going to talk about governance, risk, and compliance. It's another three-letter acronym, which is actually one of my favorites. And I personally think that governance, risk, and compliance is a function within an organization that keeps us out of jail in a way, right? So it keeps us away from a lot of trouble. And I don't know a lot about this particular function, but someone who does is Dipender, and I've requested him to share his knowledge with us. So without further ado, folks, let's get started. And Dipender, my question to you is very basic. What is GRC? Assume I'm really stupid. Explain what G, R, and C mean, please.
Hey, thanks, Agnel. First of all, thanks for the opportunity. I'm so happy to be with you. I know we have been trying for some time now, so finally the timing kind of worked out. So thanks for the opportunity. Yeah, so as you stated, right, so GRC is a heavy loaded acronym, right? I say it's governance, risk, and compliance. As the name entails, it's basically a horizontal function across the organization, right? So usually you see, there are vertical business units you have in the corporation, you have, digital transformation organization over there, and those are some of the things that are transformational. But you see governance, risk, and compliance. This is, I usually say that is a culture, right? It's not necessarily, a kind of any specific function or set of one person driving the entire GRC. I usually say is governance, risk, and compliance is a horizontal, I would say horizontal way in an organization to stay compliant and ensuring, they are cyber safe and cyber secure, right? Little bit about governance, risk, and compliance. Many organizations have very different perspective of, they see governance, risk, and compliance in a different way, right? Usually in a typical organizations, a lot of things kind of ties back to how do we ensure that we are ahead in the technology to ensure that we are cyber secure and cyber safe, right? We'll talk about a little bit about what G stands for, R stand for, and C stand for, and how they are kind of intertwined with each other, right? So start with governance, right? Governance is, think about as a strategic objective of an organization. So if you go to anybody and ask in a layman, what is governance? The first thing that comes to anybody's mind is policies, right? Company level guardrails, company level processes that helps to control the business objectives of a company, right? When you go to the risk perspective, it's a kind of, again, unified framework that GRC kind of offers so that company can see the comprehensive risk view of an organization, right? From a different angle perspective, right? It can be a legal, it can be regulatory, it can be operational, it can be technology wise. From a different angles, you can see that risk side. When it comes to compliance, as it states, so it's a regulation, right? So it's basically their set of requirements that you have to meet as your business unit to meet for your customer needs. And sometimes these are the requirements which are more internal in nature as well. So again, overall, you see that I usually say that it's not a Bible, it's not a book that you can read. It's basically a culture, right? And the way you have to see that is like not one person responsibility. It is like everybody's responsibility.
Okay. So it's a very fascinating. I love how you really got into the topic, and I think the best part about this, Dipender, was how you've explained it in a very simple way, which is really fascinating, Dipender. But help me understand this. So why does an organization need GRC?
So I think great question again, right? Coming back to the culture mindset, right? So ultimately, this is helping us to effectively and efficiently managing the risks across the corporation, right? So think about an organization or any startup organization which doesn't have the right controls in place at a company level. You can think about the overall execution of operations across company, right? So if you don't have any standards in place to follow, then you will see that downstream impact associated with that, both internally and external side of the house. The other aspect is, we are in the vulnerable environment, right? Every day, if you go on the internet, there is something happening, right? If you are on the internet, I usually say that at one point of time, you will be compromised, right? Now, when it will happen, that's your luck, right? So the point I'm trying to make here is that this is more around how you manage, the overall functional risks of an organization. So for example, if somebody is part of, information technology organization or IT organization, they need to ensure that they are managing, let's say, infrastructure type of risk. They need to ensure technology types of risks are being managed, and ultimately helping us or helping organizations to drive decisions out of those risks, right? And at the end of the day, right, there's a very kind of, I would say, analogy, that I usually share in some of my sessions is, when we cross the road in the street, what you do is you go straight, you see if it's red, amber, or green. But even if it's green, you still see on the left hand side and on the right hand side, right? And then you cross. And what we are trying to entail here is, at the end of the day, what you're doing over there is you're actually managing the risk of crossing the road, right? You are ensuring that your right, left, up and down is clear so that your path is forward and you can easily go and cross the road. So it's a very, I would say, a unique way that it is getting more critical and critical day by day in the organization. And this is more of a guiding principle, right? It's not, as I say, you have, when anybody joins the organization, you have certain amount of, trainings that you have to go through, right? Some are mandatory trainings, some are optional trainings. There's a code of conduct. I see GRC as a code of conduct, right? You have to attest your responsibility of managing your information resources. The only person who can save you and maybe ensure the cybersecurity for you is your cell phone. If you are not cyber aware, then no matter whatever you do, there will be level of compromise that will happen at some point of time.
It's really fascinating the way you explain this, Dipinder. But so the way you're talking, I'm kind of convinced that large organizations with very mature cultures need a culture around GRC. But what is your opinion on startups, right? So let's say a 5%, 10%, 5%, 10% company. How important is GRC for a really small company like that?
Yeah. It's really imperative for any organization to understand their business risk exposure, right? And usually GRC offers that, risk framework that can be uniform, both vertical and horizontal in nature, to be able to assess the risk across organization, right? Specifically talking about startups, right? Many startups you would see, there's lot of push around, okay, let's get the business, right? There's a lot of focus on revenue, a lot of focus around ensuring that they can be on the market value, they can be having, on the page of good competitors, and so on and so forth. Many times there's an opportunity to have that focus on, I would say, cybersecurity from a get-go perspective, right? And when I say from a get-go perspective, again, it's a mindset that you have to drive, that GRC by design, right? And when I say GRC by design is exactly what I meant from startup standpoint. When they are designing their whole, business value, or they're defining their whole business objectives, this should be a consideration that will help startups to manage their overall business risk exposure effectively and efficiently. And ultimately, think about, when you started seeing the risk, it helps you drive decisions, it helps you drive actions, it helps you drive investment opportunities, right? And I usually say that enhanced security comes with premium cost. And many times you would see that there's little bit of balance you have to do, right? That some organization may choose not to invest on, let's say, in general, enhancing the cybersecurity of the organization, but their risk appetite is pretty enhanced to be able to tolerate the risk. So that's where this whole unified framework kind of offers you to do that, risk versus cost versus benefit analysis, and helps to understand what's your risk appetite and tolerance in the organization as well.
It's that's very interesting, and I think you're more and more convincing me to how important the function of GRC is within an organization, Dipinder. So there's a follow-up question is, so there's a big problem with the world today is especially companies getting hacked, and there are there are viruses, there are takeovers of whole computer networks, and data is stolen, data privacy, so many different issues in that front. And I somehow believe that a strong GRC practice can kind of, I think, like you said, a strong GRC culture can actually prevent a lot of these. It's not just curing the problem, actually even preventing, taking over of entire accounts by hackers. So can you maybe talk a little bit about that? What can companies do better from multiple perspectives, but what can they do to actually prevent a lot of these?
Yeah, another great question, Agnel, right? So, and I think you are hitting the nail on the head as well. Like, prevention is better than cure is what you're trying to say, right?
Yeah.
And that's exactly spot on. And that's where, think about GRC as an enabler, right? It enables a lot of those discussions, help drive action, decision across organization. And, at the end of the day, nobody would like to be, compromised in any shape or form. Now, coming back to your point, right? So it again goes back to some of the things I was trying to say previously. We got to have that mindset of security by design, right? So if you are building anything, right? If you are enhancing your business exposure, you are investing more on business, you need to understand what is that inherent or transfer risks that are imposing to your organization as well. Many times companies choose to invest on the company, thinking about the cost, but at the same time, many companies, what they lack is, doing that risk analysis at that moment, what is coming with that investment, right? And that's getting prevalent, or I would say predominant across the industry, right? Because at every point of time, there is an interest of that cost aspect to it, right? And whenever you talk about in GRC general, a lot of organizations or many people would see this as, it's a overwhelming body, right? Their job is just to tell the things, right? Their job is just to list down the list of actions that they have to do. But I think the key point that is underpinning is that that design for compliance or compliance by design is a necessity these days, right? You can't be in a survival mode in the industry if you do not have that competitive advantage in you following this culture, right? And it's just not about, this is a culture, it's not necessarily only for cybersecurity, right? I mean, this culture can be followed in the organization, which has, maybe as a very new startup, as your business risk exposure increases, there is your increasing necessity of having it. So think about financial institutions, right? There's a big exposure on that. So needs to be enhanced level of governance, risk, and compliance organizations who continues to, review, how their security posture is, continuously ensuring that competitive advantage is there, and how we are protecting, our customers' confidentiality, availability, and integrity of data, right? Because if I'm going to any financial institution or a bank, my first expectation is that I am secure. That's the reason you go to the bank, right? Yeah. But even if you are going to the bank, if you're not secure, then there's no point going to the bank. You can probably just have a locker at your home and you can lock it, right? True. Because that's more safe. So again, based on your business appetite, what kind of business you do, specifically which have anything to do with the data, which almost every organization does have these days, there's an absolutely need to have a concept of GRC by design.
So, amazing. I really hope organizations can take this advice and implement on it. I think the world would be a much better place, and we'd have lesser hackers and all of this, right? So that's amazing. So I'm just going to switch gears a little bit. There is what kind of roles exist in the GRC space?
Yeah, again, I think this was one of the questions I asked my mentor, that how do I see my future, like 7 years back or 8 years back. So I think matter of the fact is, this role is so broad in nature that can touch the technology, that can touch, the security side of the house. If you have an interest, enhancing your career in the risk management standpoint, or being a certified auditor as well, will be some of the opportunities to explore upon. And I think the the key things you would see is that this is one of the many roles in the organization which gives you the breadth of an organization from a view standpoint, right? It's less of vertical, it's more of horizontal, right? Because of the nature of role, because of the nature of the work that needs to undergo when it comes to governance, risk, and compliance. So some of the opportunities, being a regulator, some of the opportunities to be a compliance person who can read and translate some of the regulatory requirements into the practices that an organization should follow. You can be certainly a part of a legal organization because a lot of legal regulatory requirements come from that perspective. And also you can be part of certainly enhance your career in the auditing space, right? Because there's absolutely need. And one of the key component of risk and compliance in overall GRC has to do with internal and external audits as well. So one can see that as some of the immediate midterm or short-term goals. Because of the breadth of the role, one could see themselves as a long-term being the CISOs or the SIPSOs of the organization as well.
Interesting. So I think I have a follow-up question on that, Bhupinder, right? So can you talk about the career ladder, meaning how does one start, what kind of skill sets, and then how high can someone go in this space?
Yeah, I think it's again a great question, right? So I'll probably just try to demonstrate my story, right, where I started out, because a lot of people kind of start in a very similar notion. So I think you got to have that mindset of cybersecurity, in general, have a fundamental understanding about technology, right? You need to understand how technology works. You need to be ahead of the technology. So keep on ahead of the technology whenever technology comes into play, right? Because if technology starts beating us, then it will be difficult for us to even get a hand on that.
Yeah.
So, a lot of these things kind of starts off with the fundamentals. So for example, right, so many people kind of start with some shape or form, right, architectural type of roles, right? Because in architecture, you could see, variety of architecture, right? Not only from technology standpoint, but in general, business designs and stuff like that. You can also start some of the as a short term. You can start this as some of the roles in the IT operations, right? And part of that is that in IT operations is again a very breadth of a role. You get the view of holistic, I would say, operations that enables IT to deliver services, right? You can start with the security architecture. You can start with monitoring, right? But at the end of the day, right, as you start off, that's where you have to see your next stage as, okay, I have gained this experience, how I can enable myself in the next goal. So, and that's where usually governance, risk, and compliance in some shape or form come across, right? We don't see much in the industry that a person starting its first job itself, governance, risk, and compliance. Not many people don't even know what is governance, risk, and compliance. They may be following that, but they don't even know what this is all about. And that's okay, right? Because it's not that, I would say, like first thing that comes to the mind. But what we usually say should not be the last thing as well that comes to the mind, because then it will be too late, right?
Yeah.
So, you get into that governance, risk, and compliance mode. You can be, start with a compliance analyst. You can be, you can see your space in the business continuity as well, which kind of also, aligned with a lot of risk-driven programs across the company, helps understand the overall risk profile of the company. And then, when you started going more into the technical detail, that's where you have to choose, do you want to pursue yourself in more on the tactical and strategic level, or you want to go into more on the technical side of the house? So if you, let's say, if somebody lands up to the GRC, as I was saying, they can easily land up to the, to a, senior auditor, or I would say a person managing the auditing itself across the company for cybersecurity, for information technology, or to the matter of the fact, even the financial organizations. And also, they can see themselves as SIPSO or at least the CIO as well, because of the nature of that, right? Because at the end of the day, right, what really matters is how you are, conveniently, effectively, and efficiently managing the risk of what you do. And this really helps you to build that mindset this specific role and responsibility really helps you to be super strong, in having that mindset and that framework mindset in place, so that anything you do, you have that, perspective to play around. And it helps you to drive a lot of decisions, right? When I know the fact, okay, if anything I'm investing, I need to think about 10 different things. And if I do that, I may have some downstream consequences. So that's where things can go across. So it can start from as simple as, your IT analyst to security analyst to, I would say, even some roles in the business continuity. But it goes all the way. You can see your career landing up all the way, leading the auditing for a organization, or leading even the security or an IT for the organization as well.
It's amazing. So it seems like there are some fantastic career opportunities all the way to the top. It looks like in this space. So,
that's exactly right. That's exactly right. And I think one thing I would add is that it's a lot of opportunity to learn. You get into this space, a lot of opportunity. Like people of myself, right? I never had a habit of long reading articles. I hate to do that. But the moment I got into this role, it was a transformation in me itself, right? So, I had to go through the regulatory requirements, and you can imagine, right? That's like hundreds and hundreds and hundreds of pages. I had to go through, company-wide policy standards, right? So it comes with a lot of flavors. It helps you to transform yourself, your mindset as well. And then you take yourself to the next level. So I think it's a pretty courageous job, I would say. And I strongly recommend everyone to consider at one point of their career for sure.
Interesting. Okay, actually, even I'm going to consider that based on your advice. And so I'm again going to shift gears, change directions a little bit, and ask you about my favorite topic, which is basically AI and machine learning and automation and stuff like that. So, do you see increasing usage of AI and machine learning, maybe even automation, to kind of augment what people are doing in the space to kind of make, the job of GRC easier? Have you seen that, or do you see that happening in the near future?
Absolutely, right. Some organizations are more mature than others, but machine learning and AI is the way to go, right? You can't survive on the manual intensive work anymore, right? That's the fact. And as much as you want to rely on the workforce, but at some point of time, you got to have that mindset of, I usually say, as governance, risk, and compliance next generation, right? So it's a kind of next gen of governance, and that's all about AI and machine learning, right? You got to have that fundamental ground principles for setup, just to ensure you are pretty robust in assessing the risk across the organization. And then you start investing yourself in the tool that can help automate this entire process. And usually, a lot of AI and machine learning comes, right, when you start, incorporating different services, internally or externally, right? And at the end of the day, that's where the, tools comes into play when you are designing something, right? So let's say, if I am designing a server, right? If I don't know, what are the security controls that needs to come into play, there's no way, somebody could deploy some of those controls manually, right? There got to be some level of AI or machine learning that comes into play that helps to sustain the model. And the biggest thing is, how do you ensure and assess that it is continuously, effectively working and giving you what you need, right? Because you have to invest on those tools that continually assess the risk of the organization. It's not that mathematical calculation every time you have to go through. So there is a lot of opportunities in the businesses. There's a lot of opportunities in the market you have, which can enable even GRC to truly an automated GRC. But as I said, it's a kind of crawl, walk, run model, right? And I don't know about yourself. I don't know if you heard about Bruce Tuckman theory. I'm a big believer of Bruce Tuckman. It's purely a development theory, right? So it's basically 4 stages of development, right? And it's not necessarily to GRC, but it's a kind of mindset, again, culture. So it starts with storming, and then it comes forming, then it comes norming, and then it comes performing. right? So you got to understand when the moment you form something, there will be a storm, right? You think about connect some of these things to the work you do. The moment you start putting down the things, there will be a little bit of anxiousness, uncomfortableness in the organization, right? But again, they would not see the value for long term how it goes through. So then the stage comes of norming, right? That's where you kind of comes across, see things getting normalized, people getting a gist, and then you move to that performance-based kind of thing. So it's a kind of development theory that I'm trying to say. At the end of the day, it's not like GRC is not like a plugin that you have it and tomorrow it starts working, operating effectively. It's like multi-year cultural mindset that you need to feed into, and it's everybody's responsibility, right? So it's not that I can do or you can do. Unless people have that mindset, it's difficult to comply with the rules and regulations of governance, risk, and compliance.
That's very interesting you say that. So I guess my last question for you is what is your advice? Meaning, and I would think advice in two forms, right? So one is for individuals to be successful in the space, but also, at high level advice to companies, what you advise companies to do in the GRC space.
Yeah. Keep yourself updated with the security frameworks, best practices in the market, right? Understand the business you do and try to take a mindset of what kind of risk exposure potentially you may have, right? Try to be proactive and less of reactive, because if you go to the reactive mode, the chances is that you will be compromised and it will have a lot of downstream consequences. Last but not the least, there are a lot of good certifications that is in the market, right? If you wanted to pursue your career, right, in GRC, you can think about CISSP, purely following the security protocols. You can be CISM, more on the information security management. Any certification you pick and choose in information security will be valuable if you are planning to join and be a candidate for governance, risk, and compliance. Would be at least my advice.
And what about companies?
Yeah, so from a company standpoint, again, understand the regulations that you are required to abide, right? Understand, the business objectives that you can meet with those regulations. And that's the toughest thing. It's a very tough thing to come to that common ground where sometimes you would see two things contradictory. And then as a, governance, risk, and compliance, you come to the common ground to be able to meet both, business goals and objective, plus meeting your external regulations. So keep up with your business regulations, what you are accountable for. If you are if you do any business in Europe, you are in a hot spot, right? There is so many, data privacy regulations have in place, and again, its impact is pretty massive, right? And then when you are in United States, there are different laws that one has to go through. So if you're in China, you have different regulations that you have to go through. So keep up with those regulations, continue to enhance your security posture, continue to see that how you can be ahead of some of those things so that you have minimal impact to your organization when any new regulatory requirement kind of comes across. I think these are some of the best practices that one should follow and keep up themselves updated about it.
Amazing. So I think, Dipender, I think the best thing two amazing things that I like about you is not only are you very knowledgeable, but you're also very passionate about what you do, which is, I think I've told you this a few times in the past as well, but it's just amazing, Dipender. So with that, I just want to say, Dipender, thanks a lot. I think this has been enlightening to me. I think I'm more knowledgeable about what GRC does for an organization and within an organization, and I hope those of you who are watching also have learned something about GRC within an organization. So thanks a lot, Dipender.
Yeah, thank you, Agna. Thanks for the opportunity.
Cool.